In emergency management, the definition of a stakeholder is any person or entity with a vested interest in the survival or recovery of a given community.
This is the Stakeholder Prepping podcast, where the tactical comes from the practical, and today, you become your own stakeholder.
Here are your hosts, Chris and AC.
Welcome back to Stakeholder Prepping, where yes, you are the stakeholder in your own survival. And today we're diving into a side of preparedness that honestly doesn't get talked about enough. It's not gear, it's not tactics, it's not bunker fantasies. It's the human side of collapse. It's the relationships and the identity and the emotional realism and what preparedness actually looks like when normal people are forced into abnormal situations.
Yeah, because a lot of preparedness fiction either turns into that survival gear catalog with dialogue, or everybody somehow magically survives for like a year into a societal collapse and they all have perfect hair and they don't smell bad and they have unlimited ammo.
Yeah, and they all somehow have perfectly brushed teeth every time. But
Right, yeah, no bad breath. Everybody's really close to each other and there's never an issue there for some reason.
Exactly. But today we're talking with someone whose work takes a very different approach. Kate Gilronan is the author of the novels Prepper and Survivalist, which are a pair of young adult collapse fiction books that blend real world preparedness concepts with emotional realism and the family dynamics and survival during the actual breakdown of society. This is not post apocalyptic. This is during apocalyptic, which gives us a really interesting angle into how preparedness and storytelling actually overlap.
Yeah, so Kate, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you. I'm excited to be here.
And Kate, before we go into the books themselves, we want to start with where we always do. Who are you outside of the titles and the credentials? What originally pulled you towards preparedness, storytelling, and this particular type of world building?
Anxiety. I would say anxiety is the short answer to that question. I
Fair.
have always had anxiety, but was only diagnosed with anxiety after Hurricane Sandy in 2012, which hit New York pretty hard. If y'all might remember, the subways were closed for a week and so forth. And it was particularly difficult for me at the time because I had just been very unexpectedly dumped and was living with a couple of guys who were my roommates, but I didn't know all that well. And I was preparing for the storm with one of them. The other one did nothing whatsoever. But me and one guy, we went to the liquor store. That was our preparedness for that. And we had filled up the little cart with all these like different types of booze. And then at the very end, we were like, should we add some water? It was like, yes. Yeah, you probably should do that. And I think a lot of people who get into preparedness can point to something like that, some kind of inciting incident, like an external factor that made them realize that they should maybe get serious about it. But on a more kind of intrinsic level, the type of person that can make that decision is also someone who was affected by their family dynamics, how they were raised, their personal stories. And for that, for me to become the person I am today, I want to give you an example of the riptide. Do you know what a riptide is?
I know the definition of a riptide and what to
Yeah,
look
like
out
scientifically, the riptide, like the water going out type thing.
Yes, exactly. That's exactly what it is. The water goes out because of the way the tides go. So if you're swimming like off a beach and you're caught in a riptide, you can't swim straight back to shore because the tide's going out. And the way to escape a riptide is to swim parallel to shore until you escape the riptide and then you can get back. But there is no reason for me to know that because I grew up in Nebraska. It is literally the most landlocked state in the Union. Why do I know how to escape a riptide? Because my grandmother was caught in a riptide once upon a time, and my grandfather saved her. Right, so that knowledge was passed down to me, even though I have no reason to know it. Growing up in Nebraska. So that kind of personal sort of push towards a preparedness for one specific thing is kind of some part of the way that I got to be who I am today. And another example from my grandmother is the Coconut Grove fire, which I like to talk about all the time. Are you all familiar with the Coconut Grove fire?
I have heard of it, but remind us.
Miami, Coconut Grove?
Good guess. Boston. Boston is the Coconut Grove. It was a big fire in the 40s at a nightclub. The Coconut Grove's Cocoanut, it was spelled with an A. You can look it up. The story of it is put out in a great book by John C. Esposito called Fire in the Grove. So the Coconut Grove was a monster nightclub fire in 1942. And from it, like everybody, half the people in that club died right away. It is part of the reason why we have the building codes we have today, the fire codes we have today. A lot was learned about burn treatment from the victims of the Coconut Grove fire. And the reason it is relevant to our discussion today is that my grandmother was a nurse in Boston at the time. And so she had to deal with a lot of the bodies in her hospital and a lot of those patients. And one of the things that happened at the Coconut Grove fire was that people could not get out. Sometimes the exits were locked to prevent people from dining and dashing. Sometimes they were hidden. People didn't even know they were there. So we, growing up, were always taught to know where the exits are. I have a character in my book, Shannon, who is the mother, who is the essential prepper that teaches my main characters everything they know. One of the things that she says is, don't let ignorance trap you, know all the exits. And I teach that to my kids who are much younger because everyone should know that, like where are the exits all the time. And so my personal story based on my family rather than my experience in the military, which I do not have, or some kind of external thing, even Hurricane Sandy, is how I got into preparedness, how I became the person that could prepare.
Gotcha. Okay, so this is a lot of not just family history, but generational history funneling down and what your elders taught you as
Yeah.
preparedness lessons and learning from their actual history. That's partially why I have a basic idea of how to make bathtub gin.
Really?
I mean, at least
Same
the
old.
concept of it. So,
I mean, that's what our grandparents taught us, was how to make gin in a bathtub. That's true. Yeah.
so what actually inspired you to put some of these concepts into writing, and what inspired you to write Prepper and then the sequel, Survivalist? And I know you've got a third coming out in the same vein.
Yes, I do. I haven't written it yet because I'm working on something else and because our real world is so rapidly approaching my fictional dystopia that it makes writing the book difficult. But let's see, what inspired it is a hard question to answer, though a great one to ask. There are a few of my ideas that I can point to something and be like, I read this article and it made me think of this. But mostly for me as a writer, the story is just there. It just comes to me and then I write it down, which sounds, I'm not sure how that sounds to people who don't also experience that. Probably like a little odd, but I actually pulled this poem up. I'm going to read you a short poem to show that it's not just me. All right. This is a woman by the name of Ruth Stone, and she's a poet. She says, poems come to me as if from far away. I would feel them coming. I would rush into the house looking for paper and pencil. It had to be quick, for they passed through me and were gone forever. And that's kind of the way it is for me when I'm writing. There's a story and it's there and I have to get it out. And it just comes out of my fingers onto the page. And I'm like, wow, look at that. So Prepper was one of those stories. So it's a romance novel. Why is it set in this preparedness time? I am not sure. Like, why is it collapse fiction? Just because that's the way it is.
That's crazy. So you have to get out. Are you one of those writers? Whenever I think of writers, I think of them like with the tape recorder, where they're like, "Oh man, I got to say that thing real quick, or I'll forget it." Is that it? You have the tape recorder handy and just go and throw the thoughts out there?
Yeah, I carry a little notebook. Yeah, and sometimes if I don't have that, I'll write stuff in my phone. Absolutely, that's exactly what it's like.
Oh, that's wild. So in your story, uh, I'll let you tell it, but why did you pick the collapse in such a way that you did versus the nuclear apocalypse or the, just random civil unrest or the zombies of the asteroid? Why did you pick the way the world collapsed in the way that you did?
Because it's more realistic, but that is a great question, and it speaks to, the broader genre of prepper post-apocalyptic collapse fiction, which I really like that term collapse fiction because it's much more accurate than post-apocalyptic. You see a lot of that stuff. I call it state change fiction, which is not a real term, just something I say. When you have a world and now it's different, like that, right? You've got zombies, or it was a plague, or there was an EMP, or whatever. That's much easier for people to understand because you don't have to understand many different reasons why something is collapsing. You can just point to one thing, and now society's different. I'm not saying that would have been easier to write. Like, I'm not saying that, but for me it wasn't the story that was being told through me, and because of this story, I got a master's degree in emergency management, like on background, just to write this book. And the more you know about supply chains and like the grid and stuff, the more you see how it wouldn't take just one thing to like bring us all down. It's a bunch of small things all at once or in a specific order. It just is more realistic. And that just felt like what was most likely to happen.
Interesting. Yeah. Yeah, you're right. I like kind of like the collapse fiction. But if it was a big thing like an EMP, it could be like a rom-com bomb. It could be like
Yeah,
you could have
that's
you have
right.
a different genre or something. But yeah, that's interesting. So I think Chris and I would both agree with you that does seem kind of like the more realistic thing is like that sort of slow burn, not like the one big thing. Or maybe there's one thing that sort of starts the dominoes falling, but it's really not the thing that took it down. So yeah, that's really interesting. So you're saying your emergency management background, that was just simply so you could write this book more effectively and realistically.
Yes,
Huh.
100%. Yes. Got an entire degree.
That's that is dedication to the craft, I will
That
say.
that is dedication. Yeah, that's crazy.
Yeah.
It,
I also joined, because Prepper is about we have our protagonist, Ashley, and her brother, Hunter, and they are preppers because their mother forces them to be, because she is a hardcore prepper and she drills them and she trains them and they're prepared. But it makes her an outcast at school. And then when the grocery stores start to empty and the power flickers and like shit hits the fan, then the most popular boy like comes to her for help and they have to kind of team up to survive. And it is a romance novel, so you can guess what happens there.
so I have read the book actually several times now, and
Yes.
Survivalist
Because
several times
because
now.
Chris, helped me on it. Yeah, he's thanked in the back. He's a part of the reason for all of the realism. And I know that you, AC, have mentioned that some collapse fiction and whatever is just like tactical lists and then they throw in some dialogue. And I believe that that is true. But for me, because I wanted everything to be accurate, and Chris knows so much about all of this stuff, he was just an invaluable consultant on the whole thing. Yeah. Thanks
As
again.
as was my wife. She
Yes,
contributed a
absolutely.
ton.
Yeah, she really did. I changed stuff, like, I got some based on what she said to me about the book, I made some changes, like, in my personal life, my personal preps, based on her feedback on Prepper and Survivalist, but I also made lots of narrative changes because y'all weren't just helpful in terms of, like, this is the type of gun they'd use, but in terms of, like, this part of the book sags a little bit, you could add some action here to pick it up kinda thing. Oh, yeah. Totally, totally helpful, thank you.
And yeah, and you did the same thing on my book, and I greatly appreciate it.
Yes. Oh,
But
man, which you all should read, The Hidden Soul War by C. Jordan Gray.
I appreciate the plug. Yes. Mine has absolutely nothing to do with prepping. It is entirely space opera fiction. But yeah, The Hidden Soul War, SOL War by C. Jordan Gray. If you're interested, it is
Yeah,
on
and his is
Amazon.
told in as different interviews. You know, mine is a close third omniscient narrative, so it's more of a traditional book, right? You open a book and you expect to see the paragraphs, right? That's how mine is written. But Chris is written as different interviews, and it's really well done. You should check it out. This is just gonna be like a love fest for our books here, but absolutely. Yeah, this has a lot of some military stuff in it as well. There's a lot of great character work, really good lines, really some beautiful writing. Absolutely.
Yeah,
You'll
Appreciate it.
if you like the World War Z, not the movie with Brad Pitt, but the book, which I think was Max Brooks,
Yeah.
right?
Max
Yeah,
Brooks.
very much in that same style, which I really did enjoy that book. So yeah, I would say that if you're into that style, check out Chris's book. And isn't Max Brooks is the son of Mel Brooks from like Spaceballs, right?
He is.
Isn't that true?
Really? I
Max
didn't know
Brooks
Yeah.
is Mel Brooks's offspring.
Yeah, that's kind of crazy.
Blazing Saddles brought you World War Z.
Isn't that wild? Yeah, it's crazy to think about that. Yeah.
And the Zombie Survival Guide. So,
Zombie Survival Guide is good. That's a good one too. Yeah.
but back to Kate. and back to Kate. One of your main characters, Ashley, she is the main character.
Yeah.
She grows up learning preparedness skills that kind of isolate her socially before they suddenly become invaluable.
Skills that matter. Yeah.
Yeah, she's kind of the outcast. She's really kind of destitute for friends, if you will. But why do you think preparedness is often viewed as this socially strange behavior until that exact moment it becomes necessary? Like, what is that dynamic?
I think it's because of fear. Because, I mean, aside from the stereotypes of preppers that we might get into later here, but the essential nature of a prepper is someone who is aware that things can go wrong. And a lot of people actively don't want to know that. I wanna say that y'all have talked about it here with normalcy bias. Is that
Sure.
a term that you all have
Yeah,
used?
yeah. 100%.
People don't want to believe that anything will go wrong. They wanna believe that tomorrow is gonna be pretty much like yesterday, and most of the time, they're correct. So it's like it's not like they're wrong, but the idea that something could go wrong is frightening. So when you see people preparing for that, some people react with hostility, like, right, fear leads to anger, anger leads to hate, etc. And it goes the other way too. So if you're afraid, then you have hostility. And preppers imply, they don't imply, like they straight out say, there could be a reason to be afraid. And people don't want to be afraid. So it's easier to be angry.
That's interesting. It's an interesting take, and I agree with you. And it's so weird because those are the same people that get, scared and angry are the same ones that have car insurance, and they're not planning on plowing into somebody, but they
Yeah.
still have car insurance. So yeah, I don't know. You're spot on. It's just interesting how that stigma kind of exists. But I wanted to know a little bit about you get pretty in depth in your book about some like for example like how harvesting dandelions, let's say. Like did you actually practice any of those things? Did you go out in the world and try to do some of those things that you were writing about and actually see how hard it would be to do in the world to harvest dandelions or other things that the characters did?
Yes, some of them, some that I could do, like the edible flowers, like dandelions. Some of the smaller, less preppery things, like joining a rec league to do baseball because Jake plays baseball. So I spent an entire season with people I didn't know who were not that nice. Just to have like a single line when Jake is a switch hitter. So there's a point where he's switches what side he's batting from, and the fielders wheel around, which is something that I saw happen. I put that in the book. Like, that's it. That's all. That's the only reason that you would ever know that I joined that team, just for that. That's not so much a preparedness skill, though. I think something simple like rehydrating the dehydrated meals is, something that I did just to see what that would be like, trying different ones, seeing like which one's good. I like the Mountain House lasagna personally. I don't know if y'all have
Okay.
favorites.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I've been there. 100%. Yeah.
Definitely favorites has got to be anything on the Vodes menu. They're just fantastic.
Yeah, got to check out the Vodes. Vodes does a really good job. We've kind of got a little personal connection with them, and they do a great job. But
I
yeah,
will.
subjecting the family to a lot of freeze dried meals just to see how it would go.
Yeah, because you don't want the first time you're eating that to be in an emergency. You're already, you know, stressed out enough.
Yeah, practice your preps. We say that all the time. Practice your
right.
preps. Kate, a lot of survival fiction focuses pretty heavily on violence. I mean, if you read the 1 Second After series, it focuses very heavily on violence. Your books seem to be much more focused on adaptability, relationships, and kind of the emotional and psychological survival of and the toll that it takes. Was that a conscious decision or did you just write what came to you?
I wrote what came to me. A book like that, I could never write because it's not what I'm interested in. Like I'm interested in romance and love and sex and angst, and I can write that all day long. But I can't write, like I'm gonna like torture somebody, for their resources. It's not what I'm interested in. So I couldn't. I don't think I could write a book like that.
Yeah, and so in that, I mean, yeah, it's very relationship based. And do you think that preparedness fiction in general kind of forgets what people are actually trying to survive for?
I think that preparedness fiction in general doesn't emphasize what people are surviving for. Because I believe, again, like I read a lot of romance novels. You would be better positioned to describe to the audience the kind of collapse in preparedness fiction norms. But the plot and the story are more focused on obstacles. Like he has to rescue his wife from the cult, or they have to fight off the motorcycle gang, or whatever, you know?
Hmm.
And I think that it's not like the reason he's doing that isn't clearly stated, but it's not the reason you're reading the book. You're reading the book. It's like going to an action movie versus a rom-com. So I think it's a function of that particular niche that makes those books the way they are. But I do think many books would maybe certainly appeal to a broader audience if they upped the reason for why you did that, like had maybe a few more tender moments here and there. But I say that as a romance novel writer, so your mileage may vary.
And like they say in Walking Dead that it's not about the zombies, it's about the people.
Yeah.
Yeah, like it's got to be about the people.
Sex, violence, and cigarettes will always sell, right?
And motorcycle gangs, you're right about that. Why is it always motorcycle gangs? Which is crazy because anybody who's ever owned a Harley knows that they are not going to last like going to the mechanic every week. I don't know how they're going to last in the apocalypse. It'd be better off if they were like Segway gangs or something that you could just recharge on solar and keep going. That would just make so much more sense than motorcycle gangs.
Can
They
you
wouldn't look
imagine just
yeah, which I
that's
think is why there's so much violence because violence is more cinematic just
Right,
in
of
general.
course. Yeah, of course.
yeah, and it really is, but you designed this to be a YA or a young adult novel, right? So
Yeah, they're
do you
teenage protagonists.
do you think that younger generations are seemingly increasingly drawn towards preparedness or self-sufficiency or resilience themes, or was this kind of uh, a shot to get them more engaged?
I wouldn't say it was a shot to get them more engaged because I never expected anyone to read it at all, and I still don't. Um, but I do think that younger people today are more aware of how the systems are not set up to help them, and that what they thought or what their parents might have thought is going to be there for them, even if it's like whether it's something like FEMA or Social Security or your ability to get a job out of college, which has now been taken by AI or whatever. Everything around you, those kind of um, that infrastructure is showing its cracks in a way that I am not sure was previously as obvious. So I think younger generations are aware of that. They are aware that no help is coming, which is sad, but possibly true. And so they are looking perhaps more to help themselves and their neighbors rather than counting on someone else to come and help them.
Makes sense. It really does make sense the way you're putting that. It's ringing true, I guess is the best way to put it. So, if somebody read your books and wanted to start preparing kind of realistically, like you have your book set up, but not fearfully, where would you tell them to kind of start or begin?
I would see where what they're already doing to prepare in their daily life, because the biggest hump to being truly prepared is to consider yourself the kind of person who is. So if you are a mother and you're taking your young child to the playground, what are you going to bring? like diapers, right? Maybe a sippy cup, you have some goldfish, you have like the wet wipes, like you're prepared. You prepare for things in your life already. So now just take it one step further. So, like, what if you are in the car on your way to the playground and the car breaks down? Are you prepared now? Like, do you have AAA, or are you yourself able to like fix a problem with your car? Maybe, or maybe you're not. So, if you're not, like, what are you going to do? What are the things that you need for that? And just kind of expand on the preparedness you're doing now. And at the same time, think about what is most likely to happen to you and then prepare for that. Like, I have Shannon, the mother character in my book, when she first gets into prepping, she just like buys a bunch of random stuff. I did that too because it's easier. And then it makes me feel like, well, I have this number 10 can of dehydrated strawberries. I'm going to be okay. Like, no, you won't. But it helps at first. First, because we are a consumer culture here in America. And second, because you can point to it and be like, yes, that thing. But what would be much more helpful is having skill sets. Like, you two have skill sets that are very useful. Like, my husband is a chef. Like, that is a very, like, a real skill set. Um, so you can look around and see what you're most, rather than just like buying random things or like taking random classes, like Shannon did at first and like I did. You can look around and see what is the disaster most likely to happen to you, and then you can prepare for that one. Prepare for Tuesday, not for doomsday, right? That's what I would tell people.
Yeah, that's the risk matrix in a nutshell right there. And yeah, that's what Chris and I are often preaching is let's talk about the things that are most likely to happen to you, not necessarily the things with the largest impact. Let's talk about what's most likely, and then we can kind of build up from there. But so how did you sort of balance this realism with readability? Because real preparedness is often this repetitive, stressful, and not very glamorous and super boring and not things people want to read about. So, how did you go about balancing that, the realism versus that readability?
Summary? Summary would be the craftsmanship answer to that question. So you could have something necessary like Johnny Survivalist has his cabin, he knows he needs to hunt a bunch of meat to have for the winter, right? So, and rather than depicting him going out every single day, you would write something like, Johnny got up at the crack of dawn and like took his gun and he went out to wait. And he waited through the rain and the snow. And he shot the buck. And every time he got something, he dragged it back to his smokehouse and he did it until he wore a groove in the snow and his clothes smelled like smoke even after he'd washed them, and he was seeing through the scope of a rifle even when he didn't have a gun. And then by Christmas, Johnny knew he had enough to make it until spring. Like, you could do it summary, right? Which is a tell not show. So that is craftsmanship as a writer, answer to the question of how you can make something repetitive move faster. The way in old movies you would see time pass with the calendar pages flipping, right? You can do something like that in your
Sure.
book instead. And then another aspect is you can pick what's most interesting and then do that. Like, we have scenes where they eat dandelions, but we only have one scene where we explain that. After that, they just see dandelions here and there, and it's thereafter implied that that's a thing that you can do.
Interesting. Okay, that makes a lot of sense. So, what? Let me ask you what preparedness skills do you think the normal sort of apocalyptic fiction usually overlooks?
People skills. 100% people skills. I think relationships are really important when things go bad. And that is not something that I often see depicted because it's usually kind of an us versus them. It's like me and my family, and like we've got our like again, this is the stereotypical like prepper narrative. It's like I'm in my
Sure.
bunk with my supplies and my defense, and like you're not gonna take this from me, right? But why are the people attacking you in a group? Why is the motorcycle gang a gang? Because there's safety in numbers, because relationships matter. People skills are important. I think that is often overlooked in favor of gun skills or even like gardening skills. It's the fact that no man is an island, right? We can't do this on our own.
Yeah, I guess you're right. There's very not very often do you see sort of that relationship management skill depicted
Yeah.
anywhere, right?
And
Yeah.
again, this goes back to previous episodes. I mean, we've have just referenced risk management and the Risk Matrix episode. We've referenced episode 91, going back to 48-hour skills that you can learn. And we've referenced going back to Shadow of the Future with our bartering episode. I mean, this is all stuff that we have preached and spoken about on previous episodes. This is like gold
Yeah.
to us. I mean,
Yeah, right.
Stuff. I haven't had a chance to listen to the one on sanitation yet, but yeah, I have it bookmarked because that is definitely a hole in my own preps. But I do.
Oh, yeah, the poop episode was one of my favorites to put together, but it's funny, that was kind of back when our audio was pretty bad, and we've been talking about like redoing that episode, especially with all the things we have learned since then, because we've had a lot of like plumbers reach out and say, "Hey, just so you know, like this is how often I actually see one of these backflow valves, even though, you know, they're supposed to be in every house after this date. I've never seen one." And it's funny, so you get listeners that reach out
Yeah.
and have given us more information on that. And so I think we're probably going to have to do like a poop 2 episode
Yes.
about, because I think sanitation is one of those things that's just insanely important, and it's not
Yeah.
depicted
And
on
overlooked. Absolutely. People don't
overlooked.
think about it.
It's just like the relationship stuff. And one thing, dovetailing on that, where you talked about like relationship skills, is I think leadership skills are something we don't see a lot, or we see them, like you said, where these people just inherently have these leadership skills, but they were never learned. And I think that's one thing that a lot of the prepper fiction overlooks, is they just assume that someone is in charge and they never really tell you why. Like,
Absolutely.
you
Yeah.
know,
And
like what leadership school did that person go to? Did they go to like the FBI National Academy and learn leadership, or did they, you know, that's the thing that I think is really interesting. So I'd like to get your take on that, is the actually like learned leadership, because it really is a skill. Leadership truly is a skill.
absolutely.
and this question reminds me of Jake's dad a lot.
Oh, yeah. Jake is the love interest character. And his father is kind of Mr. 1%, thinks everybody should do what he says all the time because everybody always does. Because after all, he's got a lot of money, but he isn't, he's not really a leader of men, at all. Like he's in it for himself. And I think that people, even especially in our world all the time, conflate somebody who's loud and brash and confident with somebody who knows what they're doing. And that is just not the case a lot of the time. And so what kind of leader you are really makes a difference, in the lives, obviously, of the people that you are leading. And another thing that, our world is set up for, and you don't see it reflected in Prepper and Survivalist that much because they are more smaller stories with Ashley and Jake and their love story as the world falls apart, right? They come together as the world falls apart. Um, but the idea you see in a lot of movies, in a lot of any kind of like there's an emergency, if we could just get the right leader in place, then everything would be set. Like if only they would listen to the scientists, then we could all do this thing. But
Right.
inherent in that belief system is the idea that a leader is going to save us all. But in fact, in most emergencies, there aren't any leaders, not right away. Like you are your own stakeholder, right? Like you are the stakeholder in your survival. And so it's these kind of more horizontal mutual aid networks that are the first step after an emergency rather than having a leader at all. However, if you don't have any leaders, then you're just going to have like a lot of like catfights. Like you do need some kind of leadership. And I wish that, like you said, AC, that more thought was given to thoughtful leaders and that we saw that depicted more.
Yeah, that's something that we've talked a little bit about, is that as an actual skill, just as important as first aid skills or anything else, is actually like leadership skills. And there are places you can go to learn that. There are schools that you can go to actually learn leadership, and I think that's something that is just so underrepresented, not just in the fiction genre, but in real life with with the prepper groups. You see that, yeah, people just assume that, yeah, whoever is the loudest or the richest is just in charge for some reason. But yeah, it isn't that. Leadership truly is something that's learned, and it is
Earned,
it's a
yeah,
perishable skill.
Yeah,
yeah.
show me your Six Sigma yellow belt, and then we can talk about who's in charge of the HOA.
Right. Oh, the HOA, that's a great, yeah, that's a perfect example. That's exactly right. Yeah.
So, and Kate, I want to go back to Shannon for a second. And I don't want to spoil any of this story, but you said
I have
Shannon was
never
a,
identified with a mother as like my identity character in a book before that. Like, I'm like, man, I identify with this mom in this story. That's the weirdest thing ever.
Aw.
I have comments about Shannon, but um, there's always this tension between preparedness and paranoia. So, where do you think the healthy line actually is?
I think the line for preparedness versus paranoia is the same as it is for any other thing that you might have a problem with. Like I have anxiety. When it starts affecting your daily life, then it's a problem. Like if your friends want you to go out, like join their bowling league, but you won't do it because you feel like you have to be at the range every night shooting and you can't spare your Thursdays, then you have a problem. Like you're at the paranoid level, right? That if you are um, preparing in a way that is a part of your life, but not your whole life, then I think that you are probably good.
So it's almost like an addiction problem, like a gambling addiction or drinking addiction or any other sort of habitual religious addiction. Preparedness can just as easily fall into that category.
Yeah, absolutely. I think so. Yeah, you can collect anything like what Shannon does. She has it's not just that she has the supplies and that she trains her kids. It's that that is all that she lets them do. Like they don't do things that they want to do. Like what if Ashley wanted to do ballet? There would be no way that Shannon would ever let her do that because Shannon has her in gymnastics and Krav Maga and she has her like doing all these kind of scenarios. Shannon will have her do scenarios where she'll take all the food out of the kitchen and just leave a few items and make Ashley cook with it to teach her how to do that kind of thing. It's at that point that it becomes a problem. Yeah.
And I will say that my wife and I have tried doing like, hey, you have to cook with these ingredients, but that's more like a
For fun.
chopped thing. Like,
Yeah.
yeah, let's
Yeah.
see how creative you can get with spam and tortillas and kale and something
Yeah.
else. Like, how
Yeah, but
creative
yeah,
can you get
it's
with it?
like, that's great though, because you're doing that for fun. My husband is like a jukebox of food. I could just tell him something, and it'll be like, "Boop," and then, like, he can make it out of whatever's around. It's really incredible. I don't have that skill.
I think it's important too for that. You can do that for fun. Just doing the, let's try not to go to the grocery store for 7 days and see what we start making. And it's a great way to get into the deep freezer too, like where when you've just got foods that are about to expire and you want to rotate them in and you can't force yourself to do it. Just try to not go shopping for dinner for 2 weeks, and you really end up making some very weird things that you find in the freezer.
Yeah, but it's fun. Fun for that. We should
Until
Yeah.
try
you
that.
find that one unlabeled package of mystery meat and you're like,
Yeah.
this
Yeah.
says it was frozen like 10/1
Yeah.
22, but
Just got to see what it is.
that's when you really have mystery meat stew.
Gross.
So, what would you say is kind of one preparedness misconception or concept that drives you absolutely bonkers crazy?
I would say it's the stereotype of preppers as right-wing nut jobs with shacks in the woods full of beans and AR-15s. And that's you see that all the time. That's what people think preppers are, but it's a big tent. Like I'm in this tent, and I bet that we would disagree on lots of things. And there are urban preppers. There are many preppers of color. Not every prepper is like a straight white man with a military background, but that's most of what you see. And I think that that's a problem. Not only because it's inaccurate, but because it makes prepping seem less accessible and everybody should be prepping because an emergency can happen to anybody.
Yeah, that's solid. It's true. It can happen. It can happen anywhere, and it can happen to anybody. And yeah, it's interesting what you say about it being accessible because you're right. If you don't see whatever the people like you doing the prepping, then maybe you're like, well, that's just for crazy people.
Yes, exactly, and it's
Yeah,
not for crazy people, it should be for everyone. Like, you are the stakeholder in your own survival, just like you say all the time, and it doesn't matter, like, what you look like or what you are like, the fact is that this is not likely to happen to you, but it might. So where's the harm in being prepared?
sure. So with your the research you've done for your books, and obviously now your emergency management background, what systems do you think fail a lot faster than people realize in like a real world emergency?
Water, in my experience. I think people don't think about water as much, because power is more often depicted and it's more dramatic, like the faucet stopping, right? Like you have the one moment, right? And it can be very dramatic, right? Like the drips and then they stop. But the power goes out. You have a lot of like you can see that from space. Looks really cool, like talking about movies here when like all the lights go out when they make that shot happen with effects, or like the street lights go out and then there's cars crashing all the time. Like the power going off is really dramatic, so we see it depicted more. But in my experience, the water going off is much more irritating. But I can say that because nobody in my house relies on power to survive. Like we don't have anybody here with like an oxygen machine. We don't have anybody here who needs dialysis. We do have a medication that my son has to take every day that needs to be refrigerated. But so, like, that's a problem if power's out for a long time, but I'm not generally expecting power out for a long time. When the water goes out for even a moment, I'm just so oh my god, I'm so annoyed. And, like, we have 2 weeks worth of water in the house, but just being unable to turn the water on, like, can't wash your hands, like, we have little kids, I need them to wash their hands all the time, they're sticky, and, like, we can't do that. And then, like, it happened recently because I keep bottles of water to refill the dog's bowls, like, the water went out and I only had 1 bottle left, and I was like, "Ugh." You know, and, like, I refill those bottles, like, from the bathtub, you know, it's not like they're getting Dasani or whatever. It's just like I just have it, and I was so annoyed at myself for not doing it the other like, the day before. So, water, I would say, is one people don't think of as much. I am sure that people that listen to this podcast think of that. I think the average person doesn't consider losing water the same way that they consider losing power. And people
Yeah.
also don't think about losing the internet, which, like, it sounds silly because it's so connected to power. But I know I have, like, a bunch of tabs that I have, say, like, a bunch of bookmarks, and I'm like, "Well, if something goes wrong, I'll just look it up." No, babe, you won't. You know,
Yeah.
like download that information, have it on your device, have a power source for that device, maybe print it, you know? That 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 type of thing, I think. So I'm sorry that like the internet and water.
Yeah, water's an interesting one, and you'd be surprised because you're right. People that listen to us probably have some amount of stored water, but oftentimes we talk to people that are just like, "Well, you know, I, I'm on a well, so I'm in charge of my own destiny, so I don't have to worry about that." And we are always preaching that, man. You have just identified a single point of failure, and so if that well goes out, that it's electronic and mechanical, and it doesn't work forever, and I think that's something that a lot of people don't think about because yeah they rely so heavily on themselves. They're like, well, I'm my own stakeholder, I'm on a well, so I know that I'll never run out of water. But so many aquifers can dry up and the
Yeah,
well
and
can
do you
stop
have a
working.
data center nearby now? Because that could also be poisoning your well. And even before that, if you are a person listening to this podcast that has a well, you should get your well tested for PFAS, the forever chemicals, because I used to do grants work for a place that this was their whole thing, like dealing with the PFAS. It's not cheap to have it tested, but you should get it done because they are bad and they are forever and they are in a lot of wells in America, especially in Maine and in the Northeast. Just a little PSA if you're
Yeah,
a person.
the water testing is an interesting one. It's funny you say that because Chris and I were just talking about this a few episodes ago. That by me there is a public natural spring that just shoots out of the rock, and people from the big cities come out and collect that water because it's this beautiful, gorgeous spring water. And one of my neighbors tested it, and there was E. coli in the natural spring coming out of the rock that
Yeah.
everybody's coming out and saying, oh yeah, I'm getting this great water this artesian water that I go and harvest myself. And it's like, well, actually, yeah, testing the well water is a big one too. And then obviously, yeah, the storing water. But yeah, water is an interesting one because I think you ask any self-described prepper what's most important, they will say water. But when you really start digging into it, it's you can easily identify a single point of failure in that supply chain that they've got going on, because they're like, oh yeah, it's I'm all about water, but you've got a well that could break, and then what are you going to do? You've got, you know, 10 gallons worth of water stored. Okay, that's whatever 10 people days. Then what are you going to do?
Yeah, and if it's worth prepping for, it's worth having a pace model,
Yeah.
Yes.
just flat out. So I do have a thing. This is kind of an odd question, but I know with fiction it's really easy to do. Do you have anything that is just super unrealistic that you wrote into either one of your books that your readers just kind of completely accepted in your books without questioning? Just like, oh yeah, that's normal. Okay.
I mean, I could think of some romance novel things that are a little unrealistic, but, like, collapse fiction and prepper-wise, um, I don't know. I really tried to be as accurate as possible. I think there are some inconsistencies with the availability of power and gas. I guess because of the story I'm telling, and because of the way I think things would go, it's not, again, state change narrative. It's not state change fiction. It is collapse fiction. So some things are working and some things are not. And the things that are working are like the things that my characters need, you know? And
Mhm.
then if they stop working, then they have a plan for that, you know? So I guess the convenience of the timings of certain failures, but I with something that is maybe less realistic. Like there's a point where Jake has a credit card on his father's name. It still works, even though it maybe shouldn't for lots of reasons, but nobody questions it because we're on an adventure by that point.
Ah, okay. Have you gotten any hate on from people that think that some component of your story is not realistic or something?
No, I wouldn't say I've gotten any hate. There are some reviews that point out inconsistencies because I'll read reviews on Amazon because they have a potential to affect sales, such as they are. But I won't read them on Goodreads because Goodreads I feel is like for readers, and because of the way I use Goodreads also, which is more of like if I don't like a book, I'll go on Goodreads and read snarky reviews for it and be like, yeah, see, it's not just me. And so for that reason, I haven't read any good read reviews in my own books. But in Amazon, some of the readers have pointed out some stuff. Like I remember somebody said something about the gas stations, like they wouldn't still be running without power. And I'm like, oh yeah, fair play to you, dude. I'm sure that's correct.
Yeah, nice. But it was important for the story that the gas station still worked. So
Yeah.
yeah, sorry.
Yeah.
It had to work. That's funny.
Yep.
I did really like in Prepper how you did kind of subtly reference the Waffle House index, though. That was clever.
Yeah. Thank you. Yeah, and, like, it is referenced, and there's like, a whole scene there, which is important to me because the Waffle House scene is one of my favorites because it really points out the difference between Ashley Keller, living Spotlight, and Jake Parker or living Shadow, and Jake Parker, living Spotlight, because he's a star. So, like, he goes into the parking lot is full of people who are trying to, get food at Waffle House because everything else is closed, but Waffle House, as per the index, stays open when other restaurants don't, and you can tell what is like the severity of a disaster in a region by how many Waffle Houses are open there, which your listeners probably know, and you may have even mentioned. But for me, that scene is really great because of the way it shows the differences in these characters. The way you can be like a natural leader, there is some of that, and have charisma and really like change the environment. Whereas somebody who's more of a wallflower, a background person, can just kind of fade into the background. I like that for that. It's also one of the first times we see the survival rule of threes in the book. There's a lot of like stuff like that in Prepper and Survivalist, which just occurs naturally per the story, but is great for general Prepper knowledge. I've had people after reading this, like friends of mine, they'll be like, oh, so I have go bag now. It's like, great, good. I'm glad. I've made a positive difference in your life.
There you
That's
go.
that's awesome. That's great. We've gotten that too, obviously, from a lot of people that, oh, I never thought about that thing. But yeah, the go bag is something, that whether it's the, whether it's the get home bag or the, or the bug in bag or the bug out bag, but it's amazing, yeah, how many people don't have something like that. And if they had to go, it's just throw as much stuff as you can in the back of the car and go.
Yeah, or they go with nothing. And I think it's important. We like, I don't want to speak for anyone else. I think often when we see media, the depiction of any people in them are as able-bodied, right? It is usually able-bodied people in these scenarios. And some of that is a function of the scenarios, and some of that is a function of casting. But in the real world, there are many people who are not able-bodied. Like Hunter, Ashley's little brother, has cerebral palsy in the books. But speaking of go bags or get home bags, I was thinking about this very recently for my parents who are old. They're like 75. They're elderly. They I describe them to their faces in a loving way as old and decrepit. So if they
Oh,
listen to this, there won't be a surprise that I'm saying.
okay.
Right. So my father had to go to the hospital like suddenly recently, and my mom just like jumps in the car and follows him and then stays at the hospital and has nothing because she doesn't, despite my best efforts, and I have made efforts, like have a bag that you could take. Like it doesn't have to be like a full out go bag, like you're gonna ruck it for 50 miles to your like safe place. No, it could just be like an overnight bag, which is how Jake, when Ashley explains the concept of go bags, first understands them, like as an overnight bag. Like I wish that my mother would put together, like just, like have some toiletries and a book and like just maybe a change of clothes and a bottle of water, just in case you have to just go out, even if it's not like full out emergency, but you have to leave quickly. It's not nuts. It's just, we should all be doing it.
It's just common sense, right? Mom doesn't have to have
Common
like the Four Season tent set up in the lobby of the hospital or anything.
sense.
But
Yeah.
yeah, but having a way to brush her teeth might be nice if she's going to be there for a
Yes,
while.
because you're
Yeah.
gonna stay there with my father for who knows how long. And like you yourself are also, like 75. Wouldn't it be nice to have some creature comforts? Because they are in short supply at the hospital.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a solid point. So we're getting close-ish, so I do want to give you time to plug yourself, but do you want to tell us about what projects you're currently working on, where people can find your work, all that kind of stuff?
Thanks. Yeah. Well, I'm currently working on a romance novel called Contact Tracer set in New York City in the fall of 2020. So that's a very specific time and place, probably not of interest to your readers. It does have a background mystery I could talk about, but won't here. I will focus on Prepper and Survivalist, which are available on Amazon. Yeah, you can get them there. They don't have audiobooks yet because that costs money to do well, and I won't do AI. I don't write with AI. I didn't. My covers are not AI. They're made by real people, and I don't want AI voices either. So they don't have audiobooks yet, though that is something I would like to do for them. Right now, they're both available on Amazon,
Very
Awesome.
nice. Very nice.
as is Chris's book, The Hidden Soul War.
Also
Yes,
available
it
on
is
Amazon.
available on
Go-
Amazon. And we
go
will
check it
link
out.
to both Prepper and Survivalist. And I guess we'll throw in a link
Yes,
to my book as
and
well.
yours. Yes,
Yeah, of
Um,
course. Yep.
it
But
really
when we
is.
put out the blog for this episode, we are going to link to your books directly. And, you know, Kate, this has honestly been one of the more interesting conversations we've had about the human side of preparedness because your books really explore something a lot of survival fiction skips over entirely. And that is that preparedness is ultimately about people, relationships, and responsibility. I mean, it's a totally different world when you open up the fictional side and you can create and war game as you see fit in a completely blank scape uh, universe. And it's a very eye-opening experience. Do you have any questions for us?
I guess what are the well, I also have a background in film, so I'm always really interested in movies, like the ones that you think are the best kind of collapse fiction or post-apocalyptic movies. Like I think Children of Men is very realistic in many ways. I like Nausicaa and the Valley of the Wind for like super post-apocalyptic stuff. Is there anything that you think is really realistic that you like, either a book or a movie that you would recommend to me or anybody to check out?
Ooh. AC, you got one?
Yeah, so I'll give you a couple when we talk about like sort of prepper movies. This is gonna be an oddball for you. The movie Aliens, the sequel. I think of that when I
Right.
think of preparedness with Sigourney Weaver and aliens and things like that, because they are stuck in a situation and they only have the amount of equipment they have with them. And I think they do a good job of depicting that. Of we're all here. Okay, we've got 5 machine guns and we've got 2 flamethrowers, and like I like the way they depict that in that movie because they're stuck in this situation, in a pretty dire situation, and they do a good job of here are the resources we have, how can we get out of this. So there's a couple of scenes that make me think very prepperish of that movie, but in the more normal sense of it, I would say The Road is probably one of my favorite, both the book and the movie. It's emotionally exhausting. Like there's nothing good in that.
For me, The
Th-
Road. I respect that answer, but I can't watch it. It's like too
There,
sad.
there's just nothing good in it. But one, they filmed a lot of it in my neighborhood.
Really?
So
That's neat.
yeah, they filmed a lot of it. In like where I grew up, and so I do like the way they've sort of depicted, like, when the planet is dying, this is kind of what things are going to be like, and it's not super sensational, so I do actually, I have a lot of respect for that movie. Like I said, it's emotionally exhausting. There's nothing great about it, I would love to say, the original Red Dawn or something. That would be cool.
So, question for you, AC. Have you ever looked at Alien or Aliens with the xenomorph as the protagonist and just being constantly hunted by the humans and defending herself?
That's an interesting take. I don't know, like original Alien, like they were just saying, but you know what? Okay, I'll give you that. It goes back that if you go like to the prequel now with like Prometheus and stuff, it ruins your argument.
It does.
If you start with Alien and you're like, hey man, I'm just hanging out on LV-426 and doing my thing, and then you sent these colonists in and like they're colonizers and I'm gonna fight back because I'm the Aboriginal. I get it. Yeah, I could watch that and cheer for the Alien, but they screwed it up when they went and wrote the like, 2 previous movies, right?
I think I've seen the previous
You haven't
movies.
seen
They're great.
Prometheus?
They're
They're
pretty good.
great. Or Alien, it's called Alien Covenant, maybe? Was that one
Alien
of them?
Covenant was
Was one of the
Yeah,
original?
was
Yeah.
pretty
I would
awesome.
I might have seen it if a guy's head
It,
comes off towards the end.
yeah, I
Okay.
think that's the one you're thinking of. Yeah, they electroded the alien's head and like he came back to life. So basically Prometheus came out and they didn't say that it was a prequel to Alien, but then I think it was James Cameron came and said, "You know what? Like this is, a couple more movies, this is going to be Alien." Chris, you answer the question. Sorry, we went off on a tangent there.
So I have 2 movies. I think one of them has to be Don't Look Up.
Yeah, that's
Just
yeah,
the
that's a great one.
absolute absurdity and how accurate it would have to be, just with today's all going on and how political and how just everything gets charged one way or another, even though it's a solid fact a comet is coming and it's going to eliminate the Earth.
Right.
Everything
Yeah,
goes
I
one way
love
or
that
another.
sometimes I remember the line, the Timothy Chalamet line when they're driving and he's like, "Can I be vulnerable in your car?" And it's just like so funny when he says it that it's now like on my list of things that I remember when I'm like feeling like, "Arr," and I need to calm down. It's like so funny. Yeah.
Exactly. It's absurdly ridiculous and hilarious, but that's
And
one of my
also so
favorite
realistic,
apocalypse
as
movies.
you said. Mhm. And what was your
Um,
other one?
My other one is a movie called EMP 333 Days. And not
I
a
don't
lot
know
of
that.
people have heard of this. It's kind of a
I don't know this one.
it's a B movie, uh, B budget movie, but it's basically a little girl goes to spend the weekend with her grandmother and an EMP hits. Her grandmother has a pacemaker and passes away, and she has to survive for the majority of a year getting back to a prepper compound that was a designated safe facility by her dad, and she has no one with her. So she's trying to travel cross country on her own.
That sounds great. I'll have to find that somewhere.
Do you have one, Kate?
I like Nausicaa of the Valley of the Wind for post-apocalyptic things, the Hayao Miyazaki movie from the '80s. Have you seen
Okay.
that?
I haven't. No, I haven't seen that.
You should
No,
check
I'll
it
check
out.
it
Yeah,
out.
it's
Yeah.
really great. So he founded, Studio Ghibli, as you may be aware, with,
Mhm.
like Princess Mononoke and Spirited Away and My Neighbor Totoro, etcetera. He is sometimes referred to, like, kinda simplistically as Japan's Walt Disney
Got it.
if your audience has not heard of him. But Nausicaa of the Valley of the Wind is a post-apocalyptic animated movie where they the world has, like, ended, because like, the previous world has ended because of something that is basically nuclear weapons, but like by monsters. And what has grown up after that is kind of this toxic forest. So everybody has to deal all the time with these spores. They all wear gas masks. And it is a world that is taken over and basically ruled by giant bugs, like giant roly polies and like giant dragonflies. And it's very interesting visually. And it has a couple of uh, kingdoms who have emissaries fighting over this weapon, and Nausicaa, who just wants to understand the bugs and for everyone to live in peace. And it's beautifully animated, has, a great story, and is a really cool depiction of a post-apocalyptic world, the kind of world that you don't see a lot. I don't see as many giant bugs since the 50s, you know? I
Have
would
you seen I was
recommend
gonna
that.
ask you, Kate, have you seen, The Domestics?
No.
Terrible movie, you'll love it. But it's actually it's basically it's like got like a lot of the biker gangs, and in fact, it's kinda like in the apocalypse, there's like 5 different gangs, and they're all very much play their character. You know what I mean? Like there's the biker gang, and then there's the clown gang, and then there's like the lady gang, and it's like they
I
all
love
play
it.
their.
I'm invested. Yeah.
But it's the whole movie. The premise is this couple has to they want to go get to the wife's family somewhere else. Kind of, I think they have to travel across the state or a couple of states because they haven't heard from them, and they need to go travel, and they're doing it in a 1982 AMC Eagle, which I love. But the crazy thing is that you kind of find out a little bit into the movie, and I'll spoil it a little bit, uh that at some point before the apocalypse, or as it was being apocalypticness, that they were getting a divorce.
Oh,
And so now they're kind of like stuck together. Like you can't really like get a divorce and move out because, the whole apocalypse thing. And
yeah.
so he's kind of trying to help his wife, who doesn't love him anymore, do this thing. And she hates him, but she needs him to do this thing. So actually, it's if you read a little past like the nonsensical apocalyptic stuff, you'd probably actually like it. But I just saw that recently. I was like, this is a terrible movie. I'll probably watch it 3 or 4 more times.
Sounds like a subplot of The Purge.
Yeah, it's the bad guys are very purgy in that movie. Like it is very purge like. Yeah.
I'll check it
So
out. Thanks.
that is about all the time we have, Kate. But honestly, this really has been one of the better conversations that we've had, and we really do thank you for coming on. This has been amazing.
Thanks so much for having me.
Love it, and we will direct people to your book. So yeah, please check out Prepper and Survivalist, and we'll post links to those in our weekly blog.
All right. Excellent. And come back next week for a completely different direction, like always. But until then, remember, you are your own stakeholder. We will see you then.